I'm Ben Meiselas from Legal AF, joined by co-host Karen Friedman Agnifilo for this duet. Transparency, transparency, transparency. Finally, in the Georgia court system, the state court system in Fulton County, we are seeing that cameras are allowed to record the proceedings taking place, that people are allowed to bring into the courtroom digital devices as well. Of course, they can't interrupt the proceedings, but this is in stark contrast to what we've seen in federal court, where dating back now 100 plus years, there have been rules prohibiting cameras in the federal courthouse. And although they've had trial programs in federal court saying that for certain civil cases, we can see how it goes, the federal court system has been very reluctant to change the prohibition on cameras. I mean, yes, we've covered here how Democratic members of Congress have requested from the court administrator who oversees all federal courts that there be cameras in the proceedings relating to the Trump criminal cases. And we've heard legislation being proposed and discussed to have cameras in federal courtrooms. But I truly believe that this should be a bipartisan issue. If there ever was one, we should all want cameras and transparency to see what is taking place. These courtrooms belong to the people, and the people deserve to know what's going on. And if they're presumptively public proceedings, which they are, we should all get to see them. And as technology evolves, we should be able to live stream these cases the same way that the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case was live streamed in Virginia court. But it's notable to mention that and go, why was that one live streamed? Well, because that was also in state court in Virginia where they allow it. Same thing here in Georgia. And it doesn't cause disruption. It just allows people to watch what's taking place. So here is an order that was just entered by Judge Scott McAfee, the Superior Court judge of Fulton County, saying that Rule 22 order allowing the use of devices for non-recording purposes. And it also talks about how cell phones and laptops for non-recording purposes are allowed as long as it doesn't disrupt the administration of justice. When you go to federal courts, Karen, I'm sure this has been your experience too, for most of them, setting aside the fact that they don't even allow cameras in the courtroom, you have to put your cell phones and you got to put your laptops in like a locker. Or if they don't have a locker, you have to leave it at your office. And it's nonsensical to me. And so where we have cases, especially one so fundamental to our democracy, we, the people, deserve to see it. And I'm glad that there is an order here confirming that all of these devices will be allowed into the Trump proceedings. So people could be posting tweet threads or X threads or whatever you want to call it, and giving us real-time updates. But also, we know that there's going to be cameras allowed, as well to video record what's taking place separately through a pool camera that I'm sure we'll have access to at the MeidasTouch network. So I don't see why this is not standard in all courts. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, this is something I surprisingly have a very, very strong feeling about. And I think it's about time that all courts come into the 20th century and allow recordings of all court cases. It's kind of outrageous how different everybody is. And even in the federal courts, by the way, yes, there's no cameras allowed, but some federal courts, as you said, you have to check your device into a locker. It's like they take it, even if you're a lawyer, by the way. And other federal courts, if you're a lawyer and you get permission from the judge, they let you bring it in, but you can only use it for work. And that's the thing that's really hard too, is if you're a lawyer and you do all your work on a computer now, you need to have your device, right? or there are people who have personal issues and need to be contacted by, they might have a kid at home or a sick relative or something, and the fact that they're not allowed to have their devices in a courtroom for that reason, I just find it, in this day and age, it's just so arcane. But that's just the inconvenience of it. The reason I feel so strongly about the fact that I think there should be cameras in all courtrooms is when you look across this country and you look at the people who are being prosecuted, the vast majority of them, first of all, are people of color. And they are the people who are, the ones who are being prosecuted and being incarcerated. And it's not just people of color; it's also people who have mental illness, or it's people who, frankly, there should be more sunlight shown on what is happening to the people in our society, like people who are being prosecuted. And it's the best way to make sure that people's rights are protected. These things shouldn't be happening in secret. They shouldn't be happening in the dark. They shouldn't be happening where people shouldn't be able to see, and the public shouldn't be able to see exactly what we are doing with people in this society, especially, like I said, people of color who have been, who have been historically really treated so poorly by the American culture and society and criminal justice system. And I think mass incarceration was allowed to happen because it's sort of this thing that we don't pay attention to, we don't look at. It's sort of this dirty little secret that happens that nobody wants to deal with. And I think if there was more sunlight shown on exactly what is happening, I think our system would improve for the better. And I think I think lawyering would be better. I think judges would be better. I do think you should protect jurors' identities, and witnesses who, if there is some danger, that is where I think there's a line. And there's ways to do that, by the way, or children who are having a hard time, child abuse cases. There's ways to thread this needle so that you can protect privacy and safety, but also have transparency. And a case like this, in this particular case, I love that Georgia is going to show the rest of the country that this can be done, it should be done, and hopefully it'll set the norm and set the standard for the future. In addition to what you mentioned, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, we also had the Alex Murdaugh case, right? That was a murder case, pretty high profile, that was televised. And again, that went on perfectly fine. Nothing terrible happened. And in fact, that had a tremendous amount of interest. So this case, I think, screams for it and requires it. There's so much distrust and so much misinformation out there. And the right-wing media, engine that is powered by Fox News is going to put out they're going to do what they did in Georgia with the Fulton County election workers, where they take a clip out of context and they turn it into a narrative that's a lie and that's misleading. And you don't want that happening here. You don't want them taking one or two things out of context that happens in court and then saying that's what happened in court today. That's what's going on. Let everyone see for themselves. Let everybody see what the evidence is, what the admissible evidence is, what truth is, and what actually happens here. And so I think I have such respect for what's happening in Georgia, that they're allowing devices. I mean, I love that the court put this out there. Like, yeah, there's already going to be cameras. I'm letting devices in too. Like, let's just get it all out there, right? And he did this without anyone having to ask. And he put this order in. And I think transparency and sunlight and daylight is exactly what the criminal justice system needs. And in particular, this case needs.
I think the federal court, all the way up to the system, all the way up to the top, really with the Supreme Court, which sets the tone. I think we see right now the significant reform that is needed, especially where you have the Supreme Court really dictating policy controlled by the right wing that is so out of line with where the country is on most issues. And when it comes to something like transparency and cameras in the courtroom, you have to wonder, like, who's against this? And why are you against? Like, what is the reasoning why? And Karen, as a former top official in the district attorney's office in Manhattan, you're like, look, put a camera on me. It's not going to impact my work. Defense attorneys love being on camera a lot too. So it's not, it's the people's courtroom. So you go, well, who in the federal court system stopping this? And, I think it's federal judges all the way up to the top who, ultimately set this tone. When we see stories about Clarence Thomas and other of the right-wing justices on the Supreme Court, not making the same types of disclosures that are required of everybody else and taking lavish vacations on yachts and things like that. It's all, to me, it's all inextricably intertwined with that kind of culture of you mentioned the 20th century. I think you meant the 21st century, but it's even outdated. It's even outdated from the 20th century perspective. I mean, in the 20th century, there should have been cameras, certainly right now in the 21st century, but I'm glad
thank you for correcting me. What I was actually thinking of OJ. That's what I was saying. Because you remember OJ, you were probably too young to remember that trial, but I recall that was in the 20th century. That was in the 90s. That case was, televised for the world to see. And we have not grown or evolved even since then. And again, that was fine. Salty. Who's OJ? I love it. No, but it's Salty just texted who's OJ for those of you who are wondering why I just said that. But anyway, so, it's just, this has been around for so long. And we have not evolved. We have not changed. We have not grown. We have not moved. And again, I will say this again, anytime a society mass incarcerates people who are marginalized in society, it has to be done with transparency and sunlight and daylight, because you can't just pretend this is not happening and just, let that happen somewhere else. I don't want to deal with it. No, we have to deal with it. And it was the best, and it's also the best way, by the way, to make sure that prosecutors who are out of control stay in control and don't do things that are railroading people. I mean, I never believed it was true, but the more we learn about prosecutorial misconduct, and the reason we learn about it is by things like the media. And so the more we make sure that everybody is doing their job properly, whether it's law enforcement and police and prosecution and judges and defense attorneys and defendants, that's what we need is in order to make sure that our system is improved and that there is appropriate justice and accountability. So I'm all for it. And I'm loving Georgia for setting the tone here and really hopefully leading the way for the rest of the courts in our country.
There you have it. Tell us what you think in the comments below. If you want to hear about Karen Friedman Agnifilo's origin story, go to patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We have a bonus episode that we did for our after show there, where we talked about Karen Friedman Agnifilo and my experience at Georgetown Law. Also, check out MeidasTouch.com for all breaking news, MeidasTouch.com, and make sure you subscribe to the Legal AF podcast. Have a great one.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.